this is a topic, I have to say. Do you invest or write a check? The whole concept of when do I outsource, when do I insource? If I'm scaling my companies, these are questions that you're going to be dealing with all the time. And I think the message that Todd and John and the others that he will bring into the conversation is extraordinarily relevant for right now. This is the precursor to what might be a downturn, God forbid, 12 months, 24 months, 36 months from now. These are the things that you're going to need to be doing. So Todd is CEO of Limitless Cost Reduction Specialist. His methodology, I think, is perfect for the topic we're going to talk about today. Todd.
First of all, I want to thank you all for being here today. I'm not going to be as awe-inspiring as Colonel McKnight. I will tell you that right now. I have this amazing view from here. This Colonel McKnight, American flag behind us. It's hard not to feel a lot of emotions when it comes to talking about business and leadership and the way that we need to think about what we do and how we're prepared for our businesses. Our series for the last 4 sessions has been about planning for the recession. Right? It's inevitable. Would everybody agree a recession is inevitable? At some point, at some time. Like Jeff just said, could be next month, could be next year, could be 3 years from now, but there will be a time that something occurs that the market slides in a direction. Hopefully not long, right? Because everybody in wealth management here probably would like to see another 10-year bull market. Everybody that's invested would like to see another 10-year bull market. However, that's not inevitable. So what we're going to talk about today, right, is more to keep you not inspired, but thought-provoking about your businesses and as you look at them, what to think about when it comes down to whether you're going to write a check for something or you're going to bring it in-house and invest in actually modeling it. What do you have to think about in order to be able to be prepared for that? So when we think about business, what I like to think about business is as having a team. And every team is very much related to me in my thoughts as a sport. Right? When you think about a team, what do you have to have along with a great offense to be a supreme player? Good defense. Right? I think we see it all the time. We see teams that are out there prolifically scoring, going all the way through the series, whether it be football, baseball, basketball, and all of a sudden, at one point, this great prolific offense is now being stifled by another's incredible defense. Because you can't always win by outselling your problems. You also can't save your way to success. But you do need to be consciously aware each day of the things that you need to make hard decisions on. You know, when you first enter business, in your first stage, going into your second stage, then your third stage, your challenges are different. Each day as a CEO, you have a different challenge that's presented to you. There is a point in time that you have to decide, do we hire another person? Do we insource that product or service? Do we buy it from another? Here's a great example, right? Everybody needs electricity to run their business for the most part, correct? But you don't go buy a power plant and develop an entire system to be able to provide your own electricity. You outsource it, right? What are some other things that you would commonly outsource when it comes to business? Cable company. Payroll company. What? IT. Staffing. Training. Right? There we go. Now we're on a roll, right? There's so many different things that you have to look at it on an ongoing basis because it doesn't make sense for you to start building your own trucks. Or it doesn't make sense for you to start building your own payroll service. However, there may come a point in time where building your own payroll service makes sense. And so as you're looking through your business modeling, you have to start thinking about what is important as a good offense and a good defense. Today I'm going to speak mostly on the defensive side.
when it comes to looking at your expense line items. So we're going to look at both sides of the equation when it comes to an income statement or a P&L. But what happens when you take your eye off the ball in business is what's really important. What usually happens when you think everything's good? Something goes wrong, right? Something falls apart. Now, if you're prepared, like Colonel McKnight's team were, you know exactly how to approach that battle. So you have to be questioning yourself, are you prepared right now for the recession? Are you prepared for each and every line item in your business? Are you prepared to take action when something changes? When a key performance indicator, which my good friend Ray Watson will talk about later, moves in the wrong direction? What are you doing about preparing now for those planned actions? And when you take your eye off the ball and these things go astray, how do you recover? This is where you have to really decide what you're investing in, which way you're writing the check, internally or externally. And it's the pieces that you have to think about when you're doing that that's going to change the dynamics of how your business grows or slides in the wrong direction. So what type of companies would you think, right, Malcolm Baldrige winners, get the most amount of accolades and highest valuation? Is it all about EBITDA? There are times it's all about EBITDA, right? The 90s when internet was going on, and you could have dog.com and you'd make $500 million in 7 days. But the long haul, that doesn't prove true, right? We have crashes. Market falls apart. Everything goes the wrong way. So what kind of companies really get the most accolades? Those are the ones that are both financially solid, operationally solid, right? As well as have strong, profitable revenue growth. Those are the things that are going to be important to your organization as you move forward into the recession and the preparedness for the recession. So, you know, when you start talking about expense line items, most people don't realize some of the facts that exist out there. That over $260 billion a year is lost by companies just because they don't have the pervasive ability to review their spend analytics appropriately. That $280 billion is additionally lost because of overcharges and misappropriations in billings. That the best-in-class organizations save up to 80% more because they manage their contracts and vendors most effectively and efficiently. 3 to 5% of companies lose money in their bottom line performance just because they let contracts auto-renewal. They take their eye off the ball. And at the end of the day, 9% of the companies only use the appropriate analytics to get to the best performance values. These are incredible pieces to remember. The core of an effective contract management program, right, is to have a central repository. Yet 48% of businesses only use one. So as you start thinking about these facts for looking at your expense line items, let's look at an income statement and take a different approach to it, right? When we look at revenue line items, right, now most of our income statements are P&L, there are a few line items. You may have 10, 15 categories. Maybe your business has 300,000 line items, but there's sales on the web, one income statement, web sales, or their product sales sometimes. But think of how many line items sit on your cost of goods and expenses. Think about how deep your expenses look, right? And while you're doing that, think about the things that you have to keep your eye on and aware of in order to be able to manage your costing best so that the revenue you work so hard to achieve is not like throwing it into a leaky bucket. Right? Because the last thing you want to do is work so hard to acquire revenue that you're willing to let it just slide out the back end by not looking and making sure that you're monitoring and managing your expense line items and your cost of goods in the right and appropriate way. Because it feels like everything's hitting you all at once. Who knows when the next contract's coming out? What service did we last buy? Have you ever acquired a service and wondered why all of a sudden that line item's growing and everybody, it makes no sense because the last guy you talked to about acquiring that service said it was going to be this price, but 2 years later it's double that price and you're scratching your head wondering why, right? But you go through business because you can outsell your problem And that's where you get into the danger zone, especially as you catch up to a recession, because your line item on top line growth oftentimes will get impacted quickly. And can you recover from that by minimizing the damage it would be on your expenses or your leaky bucket on revenue? So when we look at these, each one has its own specialty that is needed, right? So we talk about that investment inside your business. Do you have the right personnel inside your business? Do you have the right expertise, the right experience to make sure that each one of these line items that are appropriate for your business is actually being monitored and measured? Has anybody ever seen that this is a miss in their business model?
It's a what?
A miss in their business model?
I see it because I work with small businesses and they neglect the financials. They calculate certain things. The ones that are actually making money don't know why it doesn't feel like they're making money because they don't know as far as their expenses. And so it's like, you can't monitor it if you don't even know until it hits the fan where you're at.
Until it hits the fan. What a perfect phrase. Until everything, and we usually throw another word in there. I'm going to leave that one alone for now. But it usually hits the fan, it hits the fan pretty hard. And where everybody feels like they're going and growing, but where's all the profits? Where's all the profits? We're doing twice as much as we did before. The profits are in managing your line item expenses and the details that prevent you from maximizing your revenue potential. So when we look at that, sometimes we have to look at a single attribute to understand the depth it takes to be able to manage the line items effectively. What I'm going to do is transition this over to my partner, Mr. John Andersen from Merchant Consulting Services, to talk about what the depth of expertise you need to be able to look at your business model to every single line item. So John, if you were kind enough to come up and take over from me, I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
I know we all use business model, but I've never heard it used as far as connecting it to your financials, your business model. How does that relate? Like, how can you, does that make sense what I'm saying?
I think, okay, I believe. So, and if anybody wants to help me with that piece too, is connecting the business model between your strategies on how you're effectively managing your cost line items, as well as how you're effectively managing your growth or your sales and marketing aspects of your business has to be planned in the same way. Has to take the same process and steps to ensure that the leaky bucket side of your financial statement, right, is minimized in every capacity. The risk is removed from it as you would plan for a sales and marketing approach, as you would plan for all of your top line revenue growths. You know, people spend a lot of time there and very little time sometimes on the expense side, because we feel as it's a cost of doing business, and that's where it slides away from us, and that's where our profitability is minimized. So is that okay? Good. John, let me let you.
Anthony, if
Oh, sure.
Yeah. So just from my experience, what I've noticed is that as companies grow, or they grow dramatically, or they change dramatically, their processes sometimes don't keep up with the growth. So their probabilities of dropping the ball because they're so busy being effective, which is getting the work, keeping the work. That's generally what I find. So they're focused on getting the work done, getting their top line up, and their eye on the ball goes where now the organization is at a different plateau. The competencies of the people in the organization may also be a little bit offset from where it is now, and that's when you really need to look at that adjustment.
A perfect statement, and that's one of the things where you find in business oftentimes we're giving more responsibility to people we find most competent, but do they have the training, depth, expertise, and knowledge that they need in order to be able to monitor and measure those lines, because everything's moving so fast. We also see processes broke quite often when we start looking at the expense side, AP management side, right? We're trying to get invoices out, and vendors paid, so somebody doesn't cut us off, so we don't lose our suppliers, so we keep the lights on, so on and so forth. And what happens is the process just becomes part of a thing to do versus the intent as you did when you first looked at your first expense line item, where you got your first check versus your first bill, and you look to say, what am I going to make today? It starts becoming very muddy. So, an excellent statement.
Perfect. New products, new service lines too, that can absolutely do it.
Exactly.
One of the things that I would like to add to that, for me, I was at a training. It was right below the Kellogg's training. And it was surprising to me that nobody in the room had the burden calculated into every dollar. And that made all the difference in the world. Not just how much we bill, but the burden of every single penny that is involved in delivering that product. In my case, my company is in the construction area, civil engineering and land surveying. So we have to calculate the burden from the health, the insurances, the workers' comp. And it was a project that actually was required of us to do that in order to set our price. And had to justify the percentage, because we're all gonna get audited. Everybody that's in that project is gonna get audited. And it was interesting because I hear a lot of people that want to get in the federal world. If you don't get in the federal world, you better know your burden. and the burden really, it takes all of the conversations out of the money. It's what it is. And it takes us to a place as business owners to know exactly how much go into everyday business, every hour that we build, to be able to calculate the burden. But what was interesting is I haven't found a CFO to know how to calculate burden. I learned because of this how to calculate burden. But everybody, there was 27 companies in this project, big to small. No one had a CFO, so that agency gave us a training, 8 hours, how to calculate before you submit your dollars, your bottom line proposal. It was the best thing that ever happened to me.
What a perfect statement. And that's what this CEO Leadership Forum is here for, is to help provide those tools, those mindsets, that additional learning that you're craving to be able to best in your business as you can absolutely be. So thank you again for sharing. John, what I'm going to do is have you transition from that last piece to be able to talk a little bit more about, one single depth of a line item that needs to be looked at, and when you really look at how complicated the expense side of the business can be.
Morning, everyone. I'm John Andersen, President of Merchant Consulting Service. It's an honor to be here with you this morning, and thank you so much for coming. I was reminded hearing Colonel McKnight this morning, and thank you so much for your encouragement. But I was in the military many years ago, about the same time he was, and I remember how incredibly uneducated and how little a second lieutenant knows when he comes into the Army. And he came in one morning, and the major, who's the G2 of this group that I was with, had to interview this lieutenant. And he asked the lieutenant, he said, "So lieutenant," he said, "how long have you been in the Army?" And he said, "All day, sir, but I really like it so far." So what I want to talk to you about this morning a little bit is I want to drill down into basically one line item on your P&L and on your GLs. I'm in the merchant services business. I started about 25 years ago, literally walking flea markets on the weekend, begging flea market vendors to buy a credit card machine, and ultimately found out that everyone I talked to had no clue how credit card processing worked. As a matter of fact, I've worked with literally hundreds, I don't know how many, but probably hundreds of CFOs and controllers and all kinds of financial people over the last 25 years. And I've found but one, when I was consulting with Rosen Hotels, I found one senior controller that actually had a clue how credit card processing worked. And what we're talking about this morning is, when do you outsource or when do you keep it in-house? So what I want to share with you briefly this morning is, if you're in business and you take credit cards, if 90% down to 10%, and 90% would be like a restaurant. Almost everything they do is on credit cards, and it's all swipe. It's very, very low risk. One of my clients now is Volvo Construction Equipment for North America. So they're huge construction equipment dealers across North America. They have huge revenue, but only about 10% of their revenue is credit cards. So, and it's all manually keyed. The risk is quite high. So depending on how much, wouldn't you, if everything you were doing in credit cards was being charged a fee, wouldn't you want to know what was inside of those fees? But what I found is that the merchants that I work with don't have a clue that there's 400 different kinds of Visas and MasterCards now. And every single one of them has a different rate that it goes through what we call interchange. And if you're not set up properly, if you're not set up on the right merchant category code, you're going to pay much higher fees than you should. I'm just going to share some things with you this morning that very few people know about the credit card processing business, but the purpose of this is not about me, it's about you looking at your business if you take credit cards to go, well, you know, maybe we don't know these things. Now, here's what's really scary about this, okay? Each one of these credit cards has a different rate depending on its risk and what it's used for. But here's the other thing that I find that these merchants don't know. They've been told over the years, oh, you're a big hotel or you're a big car dealer. You're going to get a better rate. Has nothing to do with it, absolutely nothing to do with it. The interchange, which is the association made up of the banks that issue, fund, and acquire credit cards, they dictate the rate that all the processors pay and has nothing to do with whether you're Marriott or whether you're a little mom and pop restaurant. Doesn't have anything to do with it, okay? So, I want to just share with you real quick that these are the things that are inside of a credit card, is your discount rates, which is what you think you're paying. They come in and they quote you, oh, you're going to have a rate of 1.6. That's not what you pay, okay? There's transaction fees, the processors get fees, there's bank fees, and then there's this big piece called interchange, which inside of it is dues and assessments. And interestingly enough, Visa MasterCard is the dues and assessments part of this. They're only getting about 13 basis points, and I'm sure you know, but a basis point is 1/100 of 1%. So Visa and MasterCard are only getting 13/100 of 1%. Of course, there's, what, $1 trillion in credit cards now annually, so it's still a pretty big number. So a couple of years ago, I was doing a lunch and learn, and I had a little flip chart, and I thought, well, how can I most simply explain interchange? Okay? Now, you got to understand, if you can dumb it down really dumb, I can get it, okay? So what I did was I drew this little box up on the chart. The top part there is the piece that you actually have any control over whatsoever. That's maybe the transaction fee, maybe this little piece that's above interchange cost, you can negotiate that. But the huge piece, which is the squiggly part, that's interchange. You've got absolutely no control over that whatsoever. And no matter what you do, you're not going to change it. So just keep that in mind when you negotiate your credit card fees, okay? So I want to talk to you a little bit about where the losses incur, and this is the other place where I find that it's so important for our merchants to take credit cards to be able to have someone that's independent and outside of their organization to really look at their credit cards. I see a lot of losses because of fraud. Merchants aren't paying attention to counterfeit cards, stolen cards, all kinds of things that are fraudulent. About 5 years ago, I have a large Volvo construction equipment company. They're actually headquartered in Tampa. They have about 14 locations. They do all of Florida and all of Pennsylvania and New Jersey. So they got all excited. They got a call from a business in Venezuela. Said, we want to buy injectors. So this company in Venezuela bought $10,000 worth of fuel injectors. Fuel injectors are what puts the fuel in diesel engines. They bought $10,000 worth of fuel injectors, and they shipped them to an address in Miami, thinking that's where they were going to ship them from Miami. About 3 weeks later, they get charged back for $10,000, and they got to researching it and found out that it was a counterfeit card. They researched where the injectors were shipped to. They were shipped to a vacant apartment in downtown Miami. Now, not only did they lose the injectors, they lost the $10,000 too, because some of their people decided, well, it's too much trouble to put the address verification in or to validate a foreign card. If you get foreign cards, folks, really validate them. Don't take them unless you validate where they came from and know where they are. The other thing that I see that happens a lot is that professional criminals are really the ones that are doing this. One of the things that's happened is when you give your credit card to a server in a restaurant, that's why we came up with the chip card. It started in Europe, the EMV card. But they take the card and they swipe it. They have their own card reader in their pocket. They swipe the card, pull all the information off the mag strip, send it to China, make a few cards with yours, and that's where the counterfeit cards came from. So these are the kinds of things you need to pay attention to. If you're in business, okay, make sure that you're using address verification, that if it's a card you're not familiar with or a new client, have somebody call the phone number and verify that, especially if it's a large order, okay? Do these things to protect yourself, because I'm telling you, if you don't have these tools in place, you will incur losses and it'll really hurt you, okay? The other little piece that I want to share with you very briefly is this PCI compliance, which I'm sure all of you are familiar with. PCI stands for Payment Card Industry. DSS is Data Security System. This is what is set up to protect you. If you remember, a few years ago, TJ Maxx got 400,000 cards compromised, I believe. There's another processor that got the information off of about 800,000 cards was compromised. And identity theft is a huge problem. So what I want to share with you is make sure that you are doing your PCI compliance. This SAQ here stands for self-assessment questionnaire. Make sure that every year you're doing that, because two things can happen. One is your network is vulnerable, and two is you're going to get charged extra fees if you don't do it, if you're not compliant. So I had a call Monday morning. I have a little lift truck business in Shreveport, Louisiana that has 5 locations. She called me. I have a great relationship with this gal, and she called us up on Monday morning. She was kind of in a panic, and she said, "We've been compromised for $800,000. I said, "April Fool." I mean, I just thought she was kidding with me, okay? She says, no, I'm really being serious. Because they were unaware of having their network scanned, they said, I write articles, I've sent them blogs, Britt follows up with them. They neglected to do their network scan, and they didn't do their PCI compliance. So over the weekend, someone had hacked into their network and issued $800,000 in credit card credits against their merchant account. Now, $800,000, folks, would have put this business out of business because it was all gone. We were able to catch up with it quick enough. We got it stopped before the batches were closed, and we got them taken care of. But again, I'm cautioning you, do these things if you take credit cards or if you have clients that take credit cards in their business, because the risk is astronomical. And I'll let you hold your questions until we get done if you have any. Todd, I'm going to turn this back over to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, John. I'm going to make you clap for him again because I'm going to have him come back up again at the end. When it comes down to it, here's the thought-provoking pieces that you have to be considering as the chief executive officers of your business. You make decisions all the time as it relates to recession, progression, and your business and growth in other areas. When it comes to this risk management, is what John just explained is what I think is the hardest piece for any executive to grapple with, which is it's very easy to make the decisions you're highly knowledgeable about your business, your core deliverable to your clients. Very easy. You're the best. You're the expert. And if you're not the expert, your team usually has surrounded you as experts within your delivery model for that product or service. But now when it comes to all the ancillary spends that enter your business, do you really have the expertise that will allow you to have an analysis, a plan, be able to evaluate, associate or mitigate or remove risks inherent to that specific vended product or service? Do you really have the controls in place to do an appropriate review apart from what your contractual analysis was, right? Got a great guy, got a great guy, great gal, smartest person in the world, got us a great deal with that vendor. But if you're not looking at from the day that you sign that contract to the first invoice to every invoice thereafter, you'd be surprised at what you're missing in that leaky bucket we call lost revenue. And so as you look at that, you have to think about what does it take to mitigate and manage risks associated with your vendors, right, and associated with the profitability of your business. Because if you're not auditing and optimizing your spend and looking at how your vendors are billing you, you're missing dollars. And if you don't have the benchmark analytics to be able to provide you the right information, then you're guessing. How many people are good at guessing?
I think I am.
Are you? You think you are? Well done, Eric. Well done. And I think that's what it comes down to. We make our best guess instead of getting the facts aligned to make our best decision. Do you have the benchmark analytics regionally, locally, nationally, globally, to be able to make the right choice on the vendor selection and the pricing models that you're signing up for? And what about the SLAs, right? The service level agreements, or the time to repair to come out, or what their restitution is back to you when they fail to perform. Are you governing that? Are you letting it go? Are you sliding it? Are you not holding your vendors accountable because you're missing these benchmark analytics and you're flying by the seat of your pants? Which sounds good sometimes, right? Especially in a fast-paced decision. Yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. But they all impact your bottom line financials. And expertise and experience, right? We have a tendency as we grow to throw more at our best people. Just, would you agree? You have a tendency to throw it to your best person. Whether they've been trained, educated, supported, experienced, they're smart. So why not give them a shot? Got to be doing better than me because I don't understand what it is. I don't know what John Andersen just said. Yeah, whatever, interchange with little. I got the box and I can control this. So I need somebody else to analyze. These are the things that are important when you're looking at maximizing certain pieces of your business. And systems. Looking at things once in a while and questioning them and maybe getting an answer or not getting an answer or letting it evaporate later because something else more pressing came up is where you stop protecting yourself on an ongoing basis. If you don't have it systemized for how you're evaluating your expense line items as much as your revenue growth, you're going to be missing profits and capabilities within your business to grow and to persevere through hard recession-laden times that can affect your business dramatically. Anybody here that thinks differently, I want to talk to them later because I'm going to write it all down and I'm going to take it somewhere to be able to be published because it will be a brighter light on the future. For all the rest of us, I think that this rings home and true. So, all we're trying to accomplish in our business is maximizing profitability and mitigating the risks associated with how we spend money within our organization. So, one of the things that we have come together as a CEO Leadership Forum group is to bring together a team, right, that you can count on for being able to seek advice, whether it would be in wealth management or staffing or attorney-related services, training, accounting, vendor management. Whatever that may be, we brought that together in order to be able to give that session to you in trainings like this to make you aware and to think. Might not always motivate and inspire, right, as our guest speakers will. But I think it will keep you in deep thought to make sure, right, that you're questioning the line items on your bills and ensuring that your vendors are putting you in the best position for profitability. So, does anybody have any questions that I can answer? Or try to answer?
I got a question about growth.
Sure.
Years ago, I had a company that grew from $1 million to $2 million in about a 2-year period. And what I found was I almost doubled my volume, but my profits disappeared in that growth. A lot of these people in here are growing their companies. Where are the break points and how can we avoid that mistake?
Okay, so back to the analyzing of your cost base and for every product or service that you put out the door, are you really taking that into consideration every time it releases? Or are you setting prices based on market condition because of your competitors, yet you're really not looking at what's profitable for your organization to pursue? That's one piece. What are some other ways that this could actually happen?
Well, for most businesses, healthcare is
And it's a massive line item all the way around. Number two, employee expense being number one, and healthcare related to employee expense number two, right? So there's a perfect example, right, of where your cost in a single line item can change your entire P&L outlook, right? Great question. Any other questions?
So I have a point to make there. It's not always necessarily a bad thing that you do when you're not seeing profits, because it depends on how you're reinvesting it into technology. And the biggest example right now is Uber and Lyft. They're going through like a $95 billion IPO, and they're not turning profit, and they will not turn profit. So.
Yes, and you can outchase, right? Amazon would be another one, right? You can outchase being a multi-trillion-dollar company by top-line EBITDA growth. But you have to have supporting practices in order to allow that top-line revenue growth to have your operating cash be consistent. So you can't just, you still have to have cash flow coming in. That still relates back to your expenses and expense management. So you don't have to have free cash flow in your business in order to be an ultimately highly evaluated company. But you do have to have consistent practices on your vendor management, your expense management, in order to have those cash flows to run it, or you will shut down because you'll have to let people go, which we don't want to do in a recession, right? And you will have to, and at some point, you'll lower your credit rating by not being able to do that, right? By not being able to pay vendors, and you'll have to cost you more on the back end, which is where the slide occurs. And look at big companies that the slide occurs, and you'll find that. But I agree with you on technology. Was there another question?
Yeah. I was just going to make a quick comment.
Yes.
I had the good fortune of having lunch with you, and one of the things that I learned quickly is, you know, we kind of make assumptions and assume everything's market driven, it's on the up and up, we're being treated fairly, oh, they would never overcharge me, all this kind of stuff. But one of the biggest takeaways I had in meeting you is I never really realized how many things you can audit, like power bills and all the other things that we just assume, you know, and it's amazing what you can go back and actually recover losses, monies that weren't, you know, basically were taken from you. So,
Well,
I learned a lot. I mean, you can do a lot of things.
Yeah, thank you, Craig.
I might make one comment to that. What I see all the time as I talk with clients, it doesn't matter how big they are. And they were told, oh, we were set up to pay 2% on our credit card processing. I have a regular auditing service that goes with my company, and I'll come in and look at their merchant accounts, and they might be paying 3.5% or 4%, and they don't even know it.
Yeah.
For that exact same reason.
Happens every day, all day long.
And I see it all the time. I saw one little company down in the West Coast was paying 8%, and they didn't even know it.
That's
Well,
a lot of money.
And I think
crazy.
It's a lot of problem.
when you look at those line items, it's because you feel that you negotiated an amazing deal. The gap is between the negotiation and the management of that expense, day in, day out, not once in a while, not when times get tough, because it's too late. All the things we aforementioned by auto renewal clauses and cost creep coming into it, and third-party ancillary charges that popped on that you accepted, or not watching the numbers where rate escalator clauses all of a sudden become a continuance of, you know, lost profit. Those are the things that happen to you every day. And trust me, I work with multi-billion-dollar corporations, and I work with smaller organizations. Same on both ends. Sometimes the smaller organizations are better than the bigger ones, believe it or not, even though they have 10 times the people looking at it.
Just building on that, for many years I worked for P&G in Latin America, and there was a big issue in the subsidiary in Peru, and they didn't have a profit. And I said, how can it be? So they were not keeping an eye on every item. They sent a new general manager who wanted to send a message, and the message was no trips, no telephone calls, no this, no electricity, everything turned off after 6, like a shock for everyone. Unless we start looking at everything we spent, and they started looking at everything they spent, and a year and a half later, they were showing a good profit. But it was a message also to everyone in the organization. It's like, we have to keep an eye on absolutely everything. And people were just complacent. Oh, no, they're not gonna turn. Oh, we're just gonna turn. Just do this, just do that.
Well, like they talked about, it's after the contract signed and the bills start coming in, that's when you gotta start paying attention. It's not, you know.
Right.
Yeah, because
And
have you ever got
sometimes
your
it's
first
human error.
bill?
It's not even intentional.
Yeah.
Have you ever got your first cellular bill for a major organization? How close was it exactly to what you said? Like the guy or gal was there, and they looked right in your eyes, told you exactly what you're going to pay, and you got your bill. Bill didn't come close. Line items weren't even near it, nor did it make 1 ounce of sense what you were reading. So what do? We ask somebody else to look at it, who looks at it and goes, and they put it in processing, and they call up the rep. And the rep says, oh yeah, it's right, let me check. I'll check with Billy. Billy gets it, they go back, absolutely, everything's right. Remember, we had the probation charges coming to 30 days, and then remember, you had the equipment charges, and we had to do that in the taxation, but that's communication tax. But that's all part of the bill. That's not something we control, because that's 23% for this state above whatever the line item is paying, and that's what you have to do, and that's what it is.
sound like a guy in the video.
Exactly.
So who questions it?
What I see all the time too is that month end comes. I see this all the time, and the CFOs and the accounting department are so overwhelmed for the first 5 or 6 days of the month. They look at their, like my item, they look at their merchant statement, go, okay, it balances, the recs were correct, boom. They never look inside. And it happens with almost every line item, doesn't it, Todd?
Yeah, when we look at it, and even when you look at your hierarchical process sign-off, right? Local administrators bringing it to the executive directors or general managers of the business to sign off, right? They're supposed to be experts, right, on every one of those line items we put up there. All 70, 80 line items hitting their business portfolio. And then on top of it, they send it up either to their director or manager, above them if they're department head for a specific cost, and then they have to get it back to AP. And everybody is supposed to sign off on the last person's sign-off. But I will tell you, and you can challenge me at any time, how many people do you think in AP challenged the last above director's signature on the sign-off on an expense line item? And how many people in AP are trained on every single contract line item that's actually on the bill? Every line item, every clause, every escalator clause, every variable rate. How many of them watch tariffs and taxes as they change, and are they applied? Do they know how the business was actually incorporated as to whether or not they should have discounts applicable to their bill? These are the things that are happening to you every day. And to companies across America. This is not just relative to our local geography or to your business as a whole. So, you know, when we start talking about that, that's where, like whether you're going to invest in your own people, learning, educating them, training, teaching them to be able to help you look at these expenses or line items or costings within your business, or the other vacillations that you need to ensure that your business grows in the right direction. Do you have the expertise in-house, and do you continue to bring that and train that and evolve that, or do you need to look outsource or outside or right source in order to be able to make sure that you can be the most profitable entity you can and focus on the things that drive your existence in your top line revenue? Any other questions? Yes, great.
I got a question for John.
Yes, sir.
Great guys in IT security. So we have an issue, like we do PCI compliance, HIPAA compliance, all kinds of security assessments.
So you're in there?
So no, we're an IT company.
Oh, IT, okay.
We focus on cybersecurity. So when we do that, we find holes, and sometimes we come to the owner or management and say, hey, your firewall has not been updated for 7 years.
Yeah.
Your antivirus is 90s quality, and you know you gotta do this. And we find like a lack of sense of urgency. Like although 80% of businesses fail after being compromised in 6 months,
Yeah.
the statistic is 80% of them. But there's still people don't act until they're compromised.
Right.
So how do you handle it? I know you've talked about PCI compliance, and it's a challenge for us because.
And thank you. What I see too is that they don't think it's important because they're so busy paying attention to their P&L and their general ledger, and they're paying attention to employee problems and how do we manufacture this. And so when that woman called me and said $800,000 in credits have been issued on a company that only does about $4 million a year, they would have been out of business. So, I don't know the answer to that because I run into it all the time. But somehow, it's incumbent upon me to educate all of my clients. We follow up with all of our clients once a quarter. We monitor, we audit their merchant accounts to make sure they're PCI compliant. But the vast majority of the people in my industry don't do that. They actually don't want to do that.
Yeah,
they get $35 a month if they don't do it.
I think something that Ray just said at the end is a false sense of security.
Yeah.
You're all very intelligent people. You didn't get to where you are, and you aren't running the business you are because you're not. The false sense of security is whether you really truly know and can make the decision like we talked about your top line versus all the other things that you may not be an expert at and your people may not be an expert at. And it's the trust that, it's giving the client enough time to be able to drink enough of that Kool-Aid to understand where these things are and being able to help them point out an example of that in order to make sure. But you got to start challenging your own. Look at your own. Look inside first. And then if you can't do it, look elsewhere in order to be able to get the right help you need.
I was going to mention to you, I write articles a lot and post stuff a lot. I brought a copy of this Florida MD magazine. There's an article in here that teaches you how to do your own self-assessment of your own business relative to merchant accounts. So I brought enough copies for everyone. If you'd like one, I'll put some at the table back here for you. Okay?
John, can I make one more quick comment?
Yes, sir.
I caution everybody too, be careful with, I'm gonna piggyback on what you're doing, wire transfers. There's a lot of fraudulent stuff going on now. They're masquerading. It happened to one of our offices. They were masquerading as the other entity, and we caught it. But we would have transferred 6 figures to have never seen the light of day on it again. So if you're doing any wire transfers, everything's getting hacked now. You're all getting, fake emails from people you know and all this other nonsense. They're doing the same thing with wire transfers.
What?
So
I just
verify.
responded to that one for the barrister over in London. I got like $6 million coming to me.
That's because you're probably smarter than the rest of us.
But if you'd have seen,
Be careful.
How many of you saw the 60 Minutes this past Sunday about cybersecurity? If you watched that, it should strike fear in you about what's really going on. Okay?
Yeah.
To add to that, we had cybersecurity fraud happen. My email was spoofed, my ID was spoofed, and they hit your office manager. So if you have people listed on your website that would report to you, they'll go to them, and it was payroll fraud. They'll put a different number to deposit your payroll checks in, and if you're not really auditing your payroll, it was several payroll runs before we caught.
Simple little things,
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, $7 grand, never got it back.
simple little things like changing your passwords on a monthly basis. A big part of the reason why this client of mine got their network compromised is that one of their employees had left the company, and everybody knew the password, and they never changed the password with the employee turnover. He
I was
wasn't.
at a conference.
Yeah, he wasn't
And
humble.
she thought I was telling her.
Yeah, they're emailing instructions to her.
Yeah.
Cut a check for so-and-so and mail it to this address.
Yeah.
We implemented
Okay.
the policies,
So,
so everything has to be.
You know what you just
Really?
said right there is the key, is becoming aware of the problem, instituting a policy, auditing, benchmarking, optimizing, and ensuring that you're not letting things slip through the crack. And if you don't, the key is, if you don't, it will, right? It's not when or if, it's will, okay? And it's how big it impacts each one of you that's gonna make the
To
difference.
piggyback on Colonel McKnight, a lot of it has to do with training. Teaching and training your people, and I see it all the time, because the people are a little bit lazy. They don't want to do the things because it's too much trouble, and next thing you know, you get compromised. So training, follow-up, accountability, all the things that Colonel McKnight mentioned in the military, they're prevalent in business.
And one other thing, I'd like to introduce Ron Wilkinson for a second and perspective as they do fractional CFO services. I think he can lend some experience to someone who comes in and looks at companies on an ongoing basis who haven't been able to afford their own CFO at that time, to be able to talk about maybe some of those expenses. Huh?
Well, really, the comment that I wanted to make, Tom, was that we're all talking about the same thing. In fact, you started earlier mentioning how companies, they grow very quickly, they focus on the things that they do best, which is very true. That's what entrepreneurs do. They do what they do best. And then all of a sudden you've grown from a $500,000 company to a $15 million company, and yet you're still operating it the way you did when you were at $500,000. And that's when you find yourself getting into trouble. And so all the things that we're talking about, including the fraud and the wire transfers, all that can be captured under the umbrella of internal controls. But internal controls, while it's a lovely word, it's hard to build when you're concentrating on building the top line of your business. You need people beneath you with the expertise and the ability and the time to do that. And that means what? Hiring another body? Well, who are you going to hire? How much are you going to pay them? And how long will it take them? And then what do you do with them after they've done that? Well, you don't want to do that, which is why the idea of outsourcing, especially for businesses that are in that second stage realm, it becomes so important. You've got to be able to recognize that you need it, and a part of that is through some of the assessments and things that you have available from this group at no cost. You can take a look through there and see, oh yeah, we have that covered, but oh my gosh, I didn't think about that. Now how do we handle it? You can talk to your staff and say, how do we handle this? Do we have somebody that can do it? How important is it? And once you figured all that out, then maybe you reach out to a Todd to take a look at expenses or John or anybody in here. Because for a short stint, you can get the thing that you need, you can put it in place, you can protect yourself. I actually was consulting with one of the larger law firms in town a couple of years ago because they brought me in right after they almost lost $7 million from a fraudulent wire transfer. One of the accounting people was shopping one afternoon on her computer. And while she was shopping, apparently there was somebody out there fishing. And so the next time she went in to do a bank transfer, the screen came up and she thought, well, gee, that screen doesn't really look like the one I used to use. They must have done an update. And so she puts all of her information in there. And and some bad guy over across the big pond starts this $7 million wire transfer. And the only reason it didn't go through was because somebody at the bank, literally at the 9th hour, said, something about this doesn't feel right, I'm going to make a phone call. And then it was stopped. But they freak out. And I'm talking about, this is a law firm that makes about $300 million a year. So it's not a small company, not a company that didn't have all the right people in place, but they just weren't concentrating on the things they had that false sense of security that you talked about. So think about these things as you grow. You can't just focus on top line. Protect everything else so that you do protect your bottom line profits. And there's a lot of great people in here that can help with that, and you know a lot of great people yourselves. But don't cast a blind eye, because unfortunately it can burn you.
Thank you, folks.
Thank you so much.